Great.
By the way, did I tell you that we come up all?
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, and thank you for being here today. It's a real honor. My name is Hedy Rubin. I'm a Grants Program Manager at the Real Estate Foundation of BC, also referred to as REF BC. I'm very honored to be here and to share a bit about my organization. Before I do, I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the beautiful traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh in what's known as Vancouver. At the Real Estate Foundation of BC, we recognize and acknowledge the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, as well as First Nations across British Columbia, on whose unceded and occupied territories we live, work, and learn. Next slide, please. So who is the Real Estate Foundation of BC? Despite our name, we're not the real estate industry, we're not the real estate sector, we're not developers or realtors, but our name can be a bit confusing. We are a philanthropic organization. We're a grant-making organization working to support land use practices that contribute to thriving, resilient communities and natural environments. And we do this primarily by funding projects, connecting organizations, sharing knowledge on land use. We were created through legislation by the province, and we get our money from transactions on residential sales. When a property is purchased anywhere in the province, usually a deposit is made and it goes into a broker's trust account and earns some interest. Well, that interest gets remitted to the province and it gets pooled, and we receive this interest, we invest it, and then we use these funds to support research, education, law and policy reform that benefit BC communities. Next slide, please. So who do we fund? We fund First Nations, charities and societies, universities and colleges, local and regional governments. Our grants support nonprofit organizations working to improve BC communities and natural environments through responsible and informed land use, conservation, and real estate practices. Examples of eligible applicants include First Nations, charities, and societies, and we encourage applications from First Nations, Indigenous-led nonprofits, and organizations that serve equity-seeking groups. We are particularly interested in funding projects that support Indigenous rights and interests in land use that are led by or directed by Indigenous communities and organizations, as well as projects that advance racial justice and equity in land use. Next slide, please. And we are looking at all kinds of planning support. We can fund CCPs, but we don't tend to directly fund a lot of CCPs. We're not a super huge funder, and we're not able to support every kind of land use plan or CCP, but we are able to support CCP related activities that perhaps other organizations, perhaps such as Indigenous Services Canada, cannot fund. Things that may be outside the box, for example, things that may relate to storytelling about the process, to sharing outcomes beyond the nation or community, things that may serve as a model or example for other Indigenous communities, videography, workshops, and unique engagement models. CCPs can also support implementation, or REFBC, excuse me, can also support implementation of various types of activities that come out of CCPs that aligns with our mandate priorities. For example, REFBC makes grants to build capacity and advance sustainable practices in these 4 interest areas: land use, fresh water, foodlands, and the built environment. In land use, some of the types of activities that we can support include land use mapping and planning, natural asset protection, ecosystem conservation, Indigenous-led management, and planning and climate action. In freshwater, types of activities that we might be able to support include freshwater monitoring, watershed governance, Indigenous water law, conservation, stewardship, and flood mitigation. And in foodlands, activities that promote farmland access, land tenure, urban farming, indigenous food sovereignty, agricultural planning, local food policy making are examples of the types of activities and projects we can fund under foodlands. And under the built environment, things related to buildings and energy systems, housing, transportation, climate adaptation and mitigation, community planning, and sustainable development are types of activities that we may be able to support in the built environment. Next slide, please. There are some examples I can share with you of some grant-funded projects to give you an idea of activities or initiatives that we may be able to support in your community. For example, we supported Skidegate Band Council. They had developed their CCP, and we provided a grant to help them share their comprehensive community plan in a format that made it accessible to every community member, especially elders who may not have the time or ability to read a large planning document. The grant enabled Skidegate to use video and web tools to share their comprehensive community plan broadly with community members as well as other nations. Next slide, please. Another example is a grant that the foundation made to the Talton Band Council. We supported a land code working group in developing, reviewing, and sharing a community-created land code. Next slide, please. Another example is a grant that was made to the Tsleil-Waututh Nation to develop models of land tenure that reflect the identity, culture, history, and needs of the nation. The nation engaged community members and considered traditional knowledge, Western models, and examples from other nations. Next slide, please. For Tsawwassen First Nation, the foundation provided a grant for research and consultation with members to support the development of a comprehensive housing strategy for planning, developing, and maintaining affordable housing. Next slide, please. Desiko Travel Park Management Planning. The project that the foundation supported was to develop a land management plan for Desiko Travel Park, which is a proposed land, water, and wildlife management area for in traditional Silcotin territory. Next slide, please. We provided a grant to the Okanagan Nation Alliance to gather Silk's traditional ecological knowledge and applied learnings, laws, practices, responsibilities to the watershed planning process for the Kettle River. So these are some examples of the types of projects that the foundation supports in our interest areas of land use, freshwater, foodlands, and the built environment. Whether it's testing a new approach, gathering ideas from community members, or recommending improvements to law and policy, we're interested in supporting the work that communities are undertaking on the ground to help bring us closer to a socially just and environmentally sustainable future. Like many funders, demands for our grant dollars exceeds our grants budget, especially in the current situation with COVID-19. And as a result, our revenues are somewhat reduced and we have a smaller grants budget. However, we really encourage you to reach out to us by phone or email if you have an idea you'd like to discuss. We're a small team, but we really want to be accessible and we really want to connect with communities and learn about the important work and initiatives on the ground. The website for the Real Estate Foundation is www.refbc.com. We have 2 general grant intakes per year, usually in the fall and spring, and we announce these dates on our website and through our e-newsletter. To get notified about our grants deadlines and other news and events, I encourage you to sign up to our e-newsletter on our website for notifications about deadlines, events, and other news. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And if there's any questions, please don't hesitate. Thank you so much.